Premiere Pro versus DaVinci Resolve. Which editing software is the best, and should you switch? What's up guys, Matt here with Tomorrow's Filmmakers, and today I'm tackling a huge topic that most filmmakers are really going on and on about on the internet, and that is Adobe Premiere Pro versus DaVinci Resolve. Is one better than the other? What do we use for our videos? And am I going to be switching from one to the other? If you watch YouTube videos regularly or follow some popular filmmakers online, you've probably noticed a lot of them making the switch from Adobe Premiere Pro to DaVinci Resolve and making videos about why they switched. Sam Kolder was a big one that everyone talked about, and recently Peter McKinnon made a video saying he switched to DaVinci as well. I feel like at least once a month I hear of some other filmmaker who's switching editing softwares. Now, I'll be honest with you, I started editing video when I was like 16 years old, sitting around editing wedding ceremonies for my aunt and uncle's wedding business, and they used Premiere Pro. So naturally, when I started doing projects for myself, I also used Premiere Pro. Justus uses Premiere, and that's what we always have used with Tomorrow's Filmmakers. It wasn't until about last year when one of my colorist friends was talking about DaVinci Resolve and how he couldn't believe that I wasn't using it, and so I gave it a try. I spent a long time learning the ins and outs of DaVinci and getting pretty comfortable with it, and actually created a course inside Tomorrow's Filmmakers on how to use it. But I still get the same questions. Do I think it's better than Premiere Pro? Am I going to be switching? Which editor is the best? Or the biggest question I get from filmmakers who are just starting out, which editor should I start with? In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down some of the key differences between both of these two programs so that if you're thinking about which one to learn with, or if one is worth switching to, you'll have all the information you need to know to make the best decision. So if you're just starting out or want to get into editing, or even if you're already using one of these and wondering if you should switch, this is the video for you. We also have, like I said, a full course on learning DaVinci Resolve inside Tomorrow's Filmmakers, as well as Premiere Pro, Final Cut Pro, and over 1,200 training videos on every single aspect of filmmaking taught by leading professionals in the film industry. And you can get a lifetime membership to our online film academy for just 97 bucks. Okay, now the first thing I want to talk about is price. This is a huge topic between the two products and what everyone talks about when they give you the reasons why they switched. Premiere Pro is the leading editor software in the industry for now. When it comes to editing for YouTube, weddings, short films, you name it, it's been around forever, and it's probably used by like 80% of editors out there, even though that number is probably changing as time goes on. Just doing a quick Google search will show that in 2021, the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite has 26 million monthly subscribers. The numbers for DaVinci are a little old, with 2 million users in 2019, so we definitely say that there is more users than that now, but nothing compared to Adobe's numbers. That being said, Adobe knows that their platform is the most widely used software and charges a really good premium for it. Premiere Pro by itself is about $20 a month or $250 a year, and that doesn't even include other softwares in the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite like Audition if you need to mix audio, or After Effects if you want to create motion graphics in your videos as well. If you want every Adobe program, the Creative Suite costs $55 a month, and so that'll run you around $660 for the entire year. However, I do want to point out that our students in Tomorrow's Filmmakers do qualify for the student discount, which gets you the Creative Cloud Suite for 60% off, which basically makes that $660 yearly cost actually just about $260 a year. You still have to pay that every year. So if you decide to use Premiere Pro for 10 years, that's $6,600 without the student discount. But how does DaVinci Resolve compare? Well, Resolve Studio, which is their paid version, costs $295, but that's it. It's a one-time payment, not an annual charge. And yes, paid version indicates that they actually have a free version as well. As a matter of fact, the free version of Resolve actually has almost everything the average editor would need, just minus some special effects and features the paid version includes, like some effects and the ability to edit above 4K resolution. But honestly, the free version of DaVinci Resolve compares pretty fairly to Premiere Pro, and again, it's free. DaVinci Studio also comes with any Blackmagic products you purchase, including any Blackmagic camera, so that's really just an awesome bonus that DaVinci gives to its customers. Now again, that $295 you'll be paying for the full version of Resolve isn't an annual charge, that's a one-time purchase. So you'll save yourself a ton of money by using DaVinci Resolve. That $250 a year you'd be spending with Premiere Pro doesn't even include Adobe Audition or After Effects, so if you're doing any serious editing, you need to pay for the whole Adobe Creative Cloud suite, which again is an annual fee that is double the cost of a one-time lifetime fee of $295 for Resolve. So all of these things considered, I'm going to have to give the edge to DaVinci in this first category for being a good bit cheaper. Again, inside Tomorrow's Filmmakers, you are eligible for the student discount of Adobe for 60% off, but if you were to just buy it outright with no discount, you would be paying double the cost of DaVinci annually. So I know what you're thinking. If DaVinci Resolve can be used for free, then it must not have all the features Premiere Pro has, and it must be a lot more difficult to use. Well, not really. Both softwares compete very nicely with each other, and if you're fluent in using one, it's not that much of a learning curve to learn the other. I know this because I did it myself. I've been using Premiere Pro for years, and I picked up DaVinci Resolve fairly quickly for the most part. Something I do want to briefly go over is the overall ease of use. Both softwares look nice when you first open them. With Adobe Premiere, you're opened up into a default set of windows and panels that you can customize and move around depending on what you're editing. This includes your effects panel on the top left, your organization of files on the bottom left, and then on the right side you can select even more options to open these same panels in a more custom orientation to whatever you're working on. Essential graphics, sound, and Lumetri color for whenever you need to be more specific in your edit. Premiere is incredibly easy to customize. On the other hand, when opening Resolve, you'll see that it already just feels a little bit more user-friendly. I mean, if you've never used either editors, they might be overwhelming, but as an editor, DaVinci just feels easier to learn. Instead of having all of these panels all over the place that you need to open up, Resolve is really designed for a left to right workflow with a series of panels that just make sense. At the bottom of the software, you'll see a series of tabs dedicated to different steps in your editing workflow, and if you click on one, it opens up what feels like a completely different editor for that specific task. You start with your media panel where you import your footage and organize all of your clips, then you simply click on the next panel to open up your next step in the editing process. The cut panel is where you can sift and trim and, well, cut your footage, and then you move into the edit panel where your overall timeline will live and where you edit. And then you move into the Fusion panel for graphics, your Fairlight panel for audio. The Fusion and Fairlight panel is equivalent to your Adobe After Effects and Audition programs. So instead of Adobe, where you'd need to have 3 different softwares, Resolve has everything integrated together fairly nicely into one program. And you keep going down the line until you export your video. As far as ease of use, I personally believe DaVinci Resolve is laid out more nicely and is more user-friendly for people who are getting into editing, but I've just been using Premiere Pro for so long that it's easier for me to edit quickly in Premiere. However though, if you are a beginner filmmaker and you aren't familiar with either program, DaVinci might actually be a better option for you to learn with and start your career with. But again, I have to say, I really do think the difference is negligible with this, and so I can't really say one is necessarily better than the other, so I'm gonna give a point to each. They both do the same thing, but DaVinci might be easier to start with. In talking about ease of use, I did want to mention one thing. You've probably heard people say that DaVinci never crashes and Adobe crashes all the time. For some people, this may be true. My old roommate used to yell all the time that his Premiere was crashing, and I would literally hear him yelling down the hallway, but I have my autosave settings turned on to where it pretty much saves my project every 90 seconds, so the biggest problem I've ever had with a crash is it just set me back about 60 seconds of my edit. DaVinci users say they never crash. I don't know how true that is. Might be true. But yes, we have experienced our fair share of Adobe crashes, but it isn't enough to make us want to switch editors or switch everything and learn everything all over again with a different program. Next, I want to talk about the overall workflow of each program, as well as one huge difference in DaVinci Resolve, which is the use of nodes. Using nodes is one of the main reasons why people can be so hesitant to switch, and I want to explain the difference. The workflow in DaVinci is just very different and unique. Sure, it's nice that it's all laid out for you to work from left to right with ease, except when you open the Fusion panel or the Fairlight panel, you'll be immediately overwhelmed when your timeline disappears. And instead of working with layers like Premiere Pro and honestly every other editing software on the market, you'll notice that Resolve is completely different. In DaVinci Resolve, editing graphics, text, and color is no longer done by using layers on top of one another. Instead, you have to work with what are called nodes. So, for example, if I want to throw a graphic up on my timeline for a point in a YouTube video, let's say I'm making a Canon versus Sony video and I want to say Category 1, autofocus. In Premiere Pro, I would create my title, which would show up as a layer on the timeline. maybe do the same thing to create a black background, change the opacity, and then drop it onto my timeline above my video clip just like this. It makes sense. Text layer on top, overlay underneath, and video on the bottom. Very easy to understand. In Resolve, to do this exact same thing, I would need to right click, hit create new fusion composition, which will then open this composition under the fusion panel where I'm now working with nodes. I have my media in over here on the left and my media out on the right. Again, Resolve loves incorporating a left to right workflow, which is pretty easy to understand overall, but instead of having layers on top of one another, the layers are from left to right. Now, I would drag my background onto my node tree, change the opacity, and then drag my text down and create my final composition that I can now go back to the edit panel and drop onto my timeline. So, as simple as DaVinci tries to be, and I think is for the most part, using nodes instead of layers will definitely be a huge learning curve for the average user switching from Premiere Pro or any other layer-based editor on the market. This is also used the same way in the color panel. If I wanted to add some contrast, then some saturation, this would all be done from left to right with nodes instead of being a layer-based system. Another really cool feature both programs are able to do is have multiple projects open at the same time. With Premiere Pro, if I'm working on a YouTube video and there's a specific section of B-roll that I want to use from an older video I made, I can just open up that older video project and drag whatever I want from the older project into my newer project. It's super simple. I can have all my windows open at the same time on the bottom left, and it's just very convenient. With DaVinci Resolve, this is also possible. It's just not available in the default settings, and it's not so easy to do. Instead of just opening another project like Premiere Pro, you have to go to the bottom of the program, click on the home button icon, and then right click to enable dynamic project switching. This allows you to open more than one project, but you still really can't see them as conveniently as Adobe, but you can still switch back and forth between projects if you need to go back and forth from an older project and copy text or a graphic from an older project and put it on your newer project. For us, we make a lot of videos with similar themes, so it's incredibly convenient to drag sections from older videos and just drop them into whatever project I'm currently working on. I think for the most part, both softwares have their own ways of displaying essentially the same things, but with Premiere being a little bit more user-friendly with the use of layers, but DaVinci has its own way of doing the same things with nodes, which may be a learning curve again for some, but ultimately it's just as effective the more you get used to it. The layout in Adobe having multiple projects in windows and bins is just more effective to me than DaVinci having to switch back and forth between projects. Also, layer-based editing to me, even though nodes are essentially the same thing, is easier to work with. So I would give the point to Premiere Pro with layer-based editing, but if you are just starting out and you have no background knowledge on either one, I would also give a point to DaVinci for ease of use for beginners. Also, if you want an overview of how to use each program, we have 2 different videos on YouTube about how to master both programs in just 20 minutes, so go check those out if you want to learn even more info. But there is a huge difference between Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve, and that is the ability to color grade. And it's absolutely no secret at all that DaVinci Resolve is the absolute king of color grading across all programs and all softwares. Many feature films, including La La Land and even the new Star Wars movies, whether you like them or not, and we don't like them, they were color graded in DaVinci Resolve because, to put it simply, it's just the best there is. In fact, DaVinci Resolve started as just a color grading software used all throughout Hollywood and many studios, and it's only in the last few years that it's actually started to become more of an editing hub for everything else and not just color. That being said, jumping into the color panel in Resolve, it literally feels like you just opened a completely different program with just how much there is to work with. So many options for color correction and adjustments, it's not even funny. I'm not a professional colorist, but opening the color panel in Resolve definitely makes me feel like I am one because there is seriously just so much to work with. Now again, you'll also be using Resolve's node system when it comes to color as well, so that will take some time getting used to if you're coming from Premiere Pro, but speaking of which, looking over at Premiere Pro, of course we do have the Lumetri color panel for coloring, and it really is probably enough for most people's projects, but it's nothing compared to DaVinci Resolve's color panel. I color all of our YouTube videos in Premiere Pro, no problem, but I'm currently in the process of color grading a multicam music video for each of the 12 songs on our album with Untitled Worship, and I'm realizing that I might need to do this in DaVinci because I'm learning how difficult it is to color match in Premiere. You do have plenty of options to work with in Premiere, of course, and if you're used to using Lightroom and other Adobe programs, it will all feel very familiar to you with the sliders and the overall layout. You can select a LUT, and then you'll have some color correcting tools and wheels. So again, it's plenty for the average video editor, and I have a feeling that Premiere probably won't be adding that much to their color panel since the software is not designed to be the best color grading software. But if you are coloring anything seriously, DaVinci definitely has the upper hand in this category. I did also want to briefly go over visual effects and how each of these programs handle this, and I'll be honest, I don't tend to need to use After Effects or the Fusion panel for too much at all, really, because a lot of what we do is B-roll and textual graphics. However, both programs have plenty of tools for you to use to create graphics, and technically, if you want to get into super detailed graphics with Adobe, you will have to open After Effects, which is kind of cheating because you're having to open up a completely different software. But with DaVinci Resolve, most of this can just be done in the Fusion panel, making Resolve more of a one-stop shop for all things editing. However, you can always work seamlessly between After Effects and Premiere Pro with Dynamic Link if you're needing to create some more intensive graphic work. Again, it's important to remember the flow of this is completely different between programs because in Premiere Pro and After Effects, everything is layer focused, while Resolve uses nodes. So there still might be a learning curve if you're used to using layers. We don't need to do much in really either of these programs, but from what we've been learning from others and discovering ourselves, a lot of people are loving the Fusion panel in DaVinci, but mentioning that the learning curve is pretty drastic coming from Premiere Pro and After Effects. You can basically do all of the same things, but everything has a different name, and the way you create graphics is just completely different, so it's really up to personal opinion. But if you're using Premiere and using After Effects and other Adobe products for a lot of visual effects work, it might not be the most practical thing to switch to Resolve if you take into consideration the amount of time it's going to take you to relearn all of what you already know how to do in Premiere. And in addition to that, a lot of companies out there that are hiring graphic designers and animators usually have a team that uses mostly Adobe products. Again, Adobe is still the most popular editing suite, so I would have to say that Premiere Pro and After Effects still have the upper hand, at least for now, strictly because of how many people currently use Adobe products. Adobe has been around for an extremely long amount of time and owns like 80% of the post-production social content market, so there's not much for them to add to their programs on a consistent basis because they pretty much already have everything. However, I see all the time that DaVinci added this and DaVinci added that, and let's be real, Resolve knows that Adobe is the owner and the leader of the market space, and so they're doing all they can and adding more and more to their programs to compete with Adobe. I mean, seriously, DaVinci has had like 3 huge updates over the last year and a half, adding so many new features, all of which Adobe already has. DaVinci Resolve has an uphill battle trying to fight and compete with Adobe, and that's why we're always constantly hearing about DaVinci's updates and their new features. For instance, DaVinci Resolve actually just released a new version of their program literally yesterday while I'm recording this video that added the feature of transcribing audio. DaVinci Resolve users have been begging them for this feature, and DaVinci added it almost immediately. So of course, DaVinci Resolve has a lot of work to do to catch up to Adobe's programs, and one of the biggest things with teamwork and collaboration, of course, we did discuss how DaVinci Resolve is free, and their paid version is only a one-time payment of $295, which is nice, and still cheaper than getting the Creative Cloud Suite with our Tomorrow's Filmmakers discount. But remember that even though this sounds like a better deal, if you're doing photography work or Photoshop work, or even working with others on a team where they're mostly using Adobe products, it still might make more sense for you to use Premiere Pro, or even just get the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite altogether. Most people I know that use DaVinci Resolve also own the Creative Cloud Suite in general just because they use Lightroom and Photoshop and some of the other Adobe programs. DaVinci has nothing for photography and probably won't release anything for it because it's not really what it's focused on. So even if you use DaVinci, you'll still probably want to get Photoshop and Lightroom. So from what we've seen and as it appears, DaVinci Resolve is actually, on paper, better than Premiere Pro, mostly because it's cheaper and all-in-one program. Other than that, listen, they're essentially the same thing. It's like Ford and Chevy. They will both get you to your destination, but which one would you rather drive? The real question a lot of editors ask me is, should I switch to DaVinci if I'm already used to Premiere Pro and I've been using it for years? Maybe, maybe not. If you're an editor using Premiere Pro for years like me and haven't had any issues with Adobe products and don't like change, I would say you probably aren't missing anything by continuing to use Premiere Pro. I mean, after all, is it really worth 2 whole work weeks or potentially even longer learning a completely different program that essentially does the same work that you've already been doing? And while DaVinci is getting really great at providing an excellent workflow that most definitely rivals Adobe Premiere Pro, I definitely can see that if the choice is Premiere Pro or DaVinci for someone who is just starting to learn how to edit video, DaVinci might actually be the better choice since all aspects of editing take place in one program. A one-stop shop might be the way to go, especially since you can start and learn essentially at no cost at all if you download the free version. But one thing to keep in mind is that if you're diving into filmmaking but will also be using programs for photography and graphic design, the Creative Cloud Suite might be the better option for you since you also do get Lightroom, Photoshop, and Illustrator. Again, as a student with Tomorrow's Filmmakers, you'll be able to get 60% off the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite, and so that might actually be a better deal for you in the long run with access to more programs and more features. Also, inside our online academy, we have courses on how to use both of these programs, as well as many other filmmaking subjects taught by leading professionals in the film industry. Learn the best from the best. With over 30,000 students, a lifetime membership to our award-winning $800 online film course is yours for just $97. So, click the link below and head on over to tomorrowsfilmmakers.com to learn all the skills that you need to succeed. And listen, I hope this video has helped you guys out and given you more knowledge on both of these editing programs and helped you decide where to start learning or if DaVinci is worth switching to. For us, we'll continue to use Adobe products mostly because that's what we've always used and our system works just fine, but we have started to slowly integrate DaVinci into our workflow and I love using it for some projects as well. So I hope this video has helped you out a lot. Whatever editor you have, use it and learn.